Welcome back to The Great Indoors. Before we dive into today's interview, I want to tell you about our next season, which will be recorded live at MWC Barcelona from February the 26th to the 29th. You'll hear from industry experts, explore new innovations, and gain new insight into the world of connectivity. New episodes coming early March, wherever you get your podcasts. Yes, you've guessed it, TGI is back in Las Vegas. Welcome to The Great Indoors, a podcast where we look at the technological implications brought about by the next industrial revolution and how this can potentially help solve the biggest problems facing humanity. I'm your host, Matt Roberts, and joining me is my co-pilot and producer, Larissa Yee. And this time, some even more special guests. So for this new season, we have episodes that focus specifically on Canada and also interviews that we recorded at MWC Las Vegas this year. And that's where we'll start today, in fabulous Las Vegas. And for the third year in a row, The Great Indoors is the GSMA's official podcast for MWC Las Vegas, the biggest technology and telecom show in the United States. Unfortunately, however, for various reasons, I couldn't make the trip to Nevada this year, so I asked a good friend to help me out, and that good friend is Amdocs's own Mike MacDade. Now, Mike hosts his own Amdocs podcast, Your Career, Is It Choice or Chance? And that's why he's a perfect stand-in to join the TGA family for this special week. So I'm really excited to introduce Mike to the family. I know he's had a great time in Las Vegas with some great guests. So take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Matt. You are right. I am thrilled to be hosting the podcast from wonderful Las Vegas. It was a terrible sacrifice for me to go to Las Vegas, I have to be honest. I went with high aspirations, and I returned with less money than what I started with. But I guess this is the moral of the Las Vegas story, right? So I did want to highlight before we start that one of the new things that we introduced this season is the TGI Open Mic. And with the TGI Open Mic, we opened the Great Indoors to the wider population at MWC Las Vegas to get the pulse of everything that they were hearing, they were thinking, they were seeing. We invited all of the attendees to join us there and to share their viewpoints on the hottest topics of the day across the wide world of technology. On this special episode of The Great Indoors, I am joined by not one, but two different guests. The first is Caroline Chan, the Vice President of the Network and Edge Group at Intel. And the second is Matt Hatton, a founding partner at Tranforma Insights. Caroline and I will talk about the state of 5G. We'll talk a little bit about where we see edge today and edge compute tomorrow, and a wide variety of technologies in between, including vRAN and ORAN, the evolution of MPN, and of course, how AI and generative AI are intersecting all of these domains. Matt and I will talk about the evolution of IoT, specifically where we started and where we are today, where we may have missed the mark, and why we are big believers in the future of IoT, including some of the emerging technologies there, and of course, the role of AI in those domains. And of course, across both speakers, we have an interesting parallel because in the end, we end up talking a little bit about how industry vertical use cases are served by both types of technology, both from a 5G perspective and an IoT perspective. So I hope you enjoyed the discussion.
I am delighted to be joined today by Caroline Chan, Vice President of the Network and Edge Group at Intel. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fun show for us.
First, let's talk about you. So we talked a little bit about your background, but maybe if you can give us a couple lines on who you are, what you're doing, where you came from, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm a vice president at the Network Edge Group, like you described. So it is a group that really focusing on not just the connectivity. Connectivity becomes an on-ramp to the edge, to driving, modernizing a smarter edge that really benefit the enterprises, the vertical business, industrial, hospital, education, federal government, smart cities. So those are all our business in the edge side that compounded by our 5G RAN, 5G core business, security gateway, SASE business. So we provide silicon, platform, and software to the ecosystems.
Got it. We're seeing it creep in more gradually, right? Like we're seeing these applications, these use cases, these, whatever you want to refer to, right, as really a byproduct of the technology being widely available. Do you see it more like a gradual wave, or you see like a major thing coming that we should be excited about?
The first wave of 5G is for eMBB, but the next wave, which I think is really the more important part of 5G, especially the monetization, how do you bring value to the ecosystem, is about digitalization. It's about URLC, if I geek out a little bit.
Sure.
It's about connecting all the IoT devices. If we've done that right, in other words, the second wave of the 5G right, it will transform the industry the same way that LTE has.
Maybe what we should talk about next is where we do see this massive inflection point, if you want to use that term, or really I think the enterprise side of things, which is I think where you spend a lot of your time as well, right? So maybe you can give us a little flavor for how Intel and how you are thinking about the opportunity there.
We see that as really the biggest bang for the buck for 5G, going from 4G to 5G, like upgrading your smartphone is one key factor. But the bigger one, which is both, we call them TAM expansion, total addressable market expansion. Beyond that, you think about all the benefits you can bring to a smarter factory, smarter hospital, smarter city. It has a way of bringing a much greater incremental value to the ecosystem. And not just that, I am confident out of this, you're going to grow a new Uber, a new Lyft that will come out, a new Venmo. I am 100% convinced that we together done this right. It will you automate the factories. You will change how the factories and the hospital being run. Now, I'll give you an example. So my daughter happened to be a first-year resident in a hospital in New Jersey. And she was just telling me, as you rotate through different parts, she was just telling me that there was unfortunately, pretty bad car crash in the highway. And as they coming in, and they were getting ready for that, but they don't know the level of injury. They don't know much other than the vitals. The vital, they just sporadic information coming in over the walkie-talkie from the ambulance. So when they came in, they had to scramble, get all the vitals, get the stats of who's the patient. So imagine if this was a connected ambulance, which I have seen, ironically, in India. All the vital could have come in. Let's think about if it's a heart attack, stroke patient, that every minute,
every second of the timeline,
it's a life and death situation. If that situation had been there, imagine what could have been done to improve significantly a patient's chance of full recovery. So when I think of this, I really think about 5G advance, done it right, it really will improve people's lives, not just bringing revenue. Of course, we worry about revenue, but of course, we ultimately want to leave a legacy to the future population.
I was kind of laughing to myself, when you were talking about virtualized RAN early on, and I kind of think of vRAN as still, it's a maturing technology, We're seeing, growth in that space, obviously. So you've been kind of doing vRAN before vRAP, Like you were involved here early on. Can you give us some flavor on how you're thinking about the underlying tech?
I think the underlying tech through the entire ecosystem investment is getting maturing. So some people might say, O-RAN is now growing as fast. But remember, the telco industry is very conservative. We don't do things rash. We wanted to see proven. But you start seeing O-RAN now in Greenfield, Dish Network here in the United States, Rakuten in Japan, and we've seen now some private networks adopting O-RAN, especially in many of the bases here in the United States under DoD, Department of Defense investment. Vodafone just announced O-RAN is going to be rolled out in one of the most mature brownfield markets, United Kingdom. No, that is a milestone. Intel has so confident in this, we actually invest in fourth generation of Xeon called Sapphire Rapids EE, where we put the 5G O-RAN acceleration directly into the CPU compound. That's a first. We don't do that unless we know this industry is going to go, because that's a huge investment we make.
In the physical form, right?
We put our money where our mouth is.
Sure.
We got to see the benefit of this firsthand in enterprise, in the private network, because when you have a disaggregated network, when you have a cloud native network, the things that you're going to see in the cloud will materialize in the network that would directly benefit our enterprise customers.
So this, now you mentioned private network. Did you see anything here that got you excited? Anything new? Things that tie really nicely to what Intel is doing?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned at the beginning, now my new mission is to run 5G monetization, which includes private network. Like you, I see a lot of private network in display. And the more exciting thing is I see a lot of AR, VR started happening in the private network. Ultimately, private network to me is an on-ramp to a much smarter edge, bringing some of the AI into play and bringing some of the immersive experience where we previously could not have. Because public network is great, it's wonderful, but public network is done to serve a broader population. It's more difficult to give a SLA level to a particular enterprise, like a factory. Something that's really critical needs to happen, or a hospital where you cannot afford to lose SLA. So in that cases, you need to deliver that either through a network slice from operator in the United States, and there's also CBRS, a shared spectrum. People have been using it and successfully rolling out in different factories and oil and gas fields and bases. I think I mentioned before, military bases. So there are many ways to deploy this and leverage the faster connectivity, the ultra reliable, ultra low latency to achieve some of the business results that cannot otherwise achieve.
TGI Open Mic.
I'm Ron Westfall, Research Director at the Futurum Group. One that definitely comes to mind is 5G monetization. And I believe that we're seeing some breakthroughs and innovations that are helping the cause. I believe that, first of all, 5G itself is making progress in areas such as more operators are implementing 5G standalone. And what that means is that they'll have more capabilities, basically coming from the core of their network, and that can, I believe, provide the foundation for enabling more 5G monetization use cases. And I think one thing that we're definitely seeing here at the show are capabilities such as Gen AI that are helping that cause. For example, Gen AI capabilities are basically going to allow operators, the telcos, to use their existing OSS, BSS data to basically unleash more capabilities. That is, they need a trusted partner, such as an Amdocs, that can provide a trusted gateway, a knowledge base for using OSS, BSS data to better enable monetization. And that includes, for example, being able to have a better understanding as to how customers are responding to 5G-enabled services. On the enterprise side, what I see that is very encouraging is the fact that, again, 5G standalone capabilities are enabling things such as T-Mobile's 5G SASE offering. That was an announcement here at the show. And that's demonstrating that, yes, the operators are coming up with ways to use standalone capabilities to offer new services that can help stand out. And what's encouraging about that particular offering is that it's SIM-based. And so it's using the built-in security and capabilities of 5G SIM technology and mobile SIM technology in general to enable such a capability. Another thing that I see encouraging is that we're seeing more developers, I think, becoming more interested in using telco network capabilities to design applications that are specific to operator offerings. For example, it could be improved home networking security capabilities, improved hybrid workforce offerings, for example, that again links to SASE capabilities. Also, I think we're seeing companies such as Qualcomm bringing innovation to things such as on-device AI capabilities that is enabling the users to have more privacy assurances in how they use AI technology. As we know, there is still concern out there in terms of, for example, using cloud-based AI training and inferencing. However, by having AI implemented on the device, and that can be up to millions or even a billion parameters, but I think we're seeing a stronger use case for using AI in terms of the entire 5G ecosystem, using what the cloud can offer in combination with what devices distributed across millions of users on the business as well as the consumer side. So I think there's definitely some encouraging progress we're seeing at the show here, and as a result, I anticipate that 5G monetization is something that will definitely get some wind behind its sails from this week's event.
You used a term that mobile private networks are kind of the bridge between the cloud and the edge. So can you give us a little kind of thinking about, let's call it the power of the edge moving forward and how you think that's going to bring value to the industry?
We see a lot of data being generated on the edge. In fact, we're seeing the fastest growing data by 2026. All of the data, more than 50% of it will be generated on the edge. Some even say 70%, 80%. Do we need to move all of the data from the edge to the cloud, or do we want to process some of the data on the edge because of latency concerns, cost of moving everything to the cloud? Yeah, you could do inference on the edge in a very contextual, timely fashion. So we see the shift to do this on the edge, but this is all enabled because now you have a strong, broad, rapid, low latency, reliable connectivity, the network between the edge and the cloud. So we now see a much more unified edge, network, and cloud becoming one. Where you put the data, where you analyze the data, is up to the enterprise to decide based on your particular needs and use case. You're no longer constrained. You do what you need to do because now the underlying and the edge, smart edge, allow you to do so.
Maybe I'm going down the avenue of trick questions with you, so you just have to bear with me. But I think we danced around kind of the history of IoT here a little bit, right? And we talked about that evolution. And I actually want to combine two things. One is this kind of comment around IoT's evolution, right? The second thing is, your comments earlier in our discussion that we're a bit conservative as an industry, right? If you look at telecom in general, right? Are we, in a way, putting ourselves at risk of creating all these pockets that aren't future ready? Like, are we creating another fragmented IoT universe here in this new technology?
The mobile industry really runs on scale. We want to create blueprint, we want to create recipe. We don't want to create isolation that we recreate for every single use cases and verticals. And that doesn't scale. That doesn't do anybody any good. So I think we learn from that. We're going to do things differently. I am very confident we're not going to create the isolated islands anymore.
Sure. We hear a lot of buzz about generative AI, right? But I think people forget that there's still a major role for what I would call traditional AI here, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about it, how you see the opportunity there?
Yeah, for our group, because we're on the network edge side, we really focusing on, number one, is network AI. Since we are providing the most fundamental technology, something called a silicon platform, and the fundamental enabling software. So we have a lot of telemetry. Think about the way that you will do power control in the traditional way. It tends to be open loop. But because we're telemetry, because we can run AI in the network now, our silicon is actually designed now with AI built into this, both from an instruction set from a silicon perspective. We have invested tremendously in network AI. So edge AI is another aspect that we really invest in. We have invested in softwares like OpenVINO, Edge Insight. Building OpenVINO is a tool to help developers to build language model. All of these is investment that we make from ground up, not mentioning the silicon investment we made to enable AI running on edge. So AI does not only have to happen in the cloud. AI can very well happen on the edge, very cost effectively running on CPU alone. So this is the goal that we're taking, and we do see a lot of use cases today that edge AI will benefit the ecosystem as a whole.
What about the next 12 months? Is there something that, A, you're excited about, B, you've got a milestone in your mind that you'd like to see? What keeps you coming to work in the morning, so to speak?
I serve on a CTIA board. We just had a board meeting, and one of the major rally cry is that we need to monetize the investment that we have made in 5G collectively. So 5G monetization is going to be, I'm going to invest my time. I know Intel is focusing much on that. And that calls for collaboration across the board. We can't do this by ourselves, And I think the next 12 months, we're going to see very significant lighthouse use cases and customers.
Sure.
That puts us to the end of 2024, and I do expect to see scale. Certainly my management expect to see some return of investment.
I think we all hope for that, for sure.
Yeah. But next thing we need to see is some marquee industrials, hospitals, educations, and venues. We're going to see some really good showcases showing that, yes, 5G is not just about connectivity. Yes, 5G can bring different use cases and benefit onto the enterprises, and all of that will eventually become a blueprint for us to go forward to 6G. And that will also impact how we design softwares, how we design silicons. A lot of good things next 12 months is going to be very critical.
The most exciting 12 months yet, right? That's how we think about it. So last thing before we let you go, we have a pop quiz of sorts.
Oh, you didn't tell me that. Oh my goodness.
We don't like to prepare anyone. We like to get honest answers.
Oh, no.
So it's what we call our TGI to go. This is the Great Indoors to go. So it's where we ask you 5 rapid fire questions. We just get a better feel of your personality. So you ready?
Yep.
TGI to go.
So first one, Barry Manilow or Rod Stewart?
Rod Stewart.
That's a quick answer. Chili or clam chowder?
Clam chowder.
Did you spend time in New England?
Boston.
Ah, okay. This makes sense. Running or yoga?
Yoga.
Okay.
Bad knees.
Bad knee. Okay, this is a bit of an unfair question, but Dallas or Fort Worth?
Dallas. Oh my gosh.
Fort Worth has got its little sprinkles of gems there, right? So
sprinkle.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Star Wars. I think it's a trend. Everyone seems to love Star Wars. So, well, Caroline, thank you very much. We appreciate you spending the time with us.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a delightful discussion.
Always this thing started right when you say I used to work in Norton.
I know. I'm not sure if it sets a good level or not, but it's a good way to get us started. And I hope if we end up back here again next year, I hope you find a few minutes to chat with us again. We'd love to have you back.
Would love to.
And I'm sure we'll chat throughout the year. So great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am delighted to be joined today by Matt Hatton, the founding partner of Tranforma Insights. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Glad you can make time to join us. Maybe give a quick background, who you are, where you came from, what you're doing today, and then we'll get into some of the more topical things.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Hatton, one of the founding partners at Tranforma Insights. We're a technology research and consulting firm, relatively new, about coming up on 4 years, I think, now, but not my first time around. I founded a company called McKenna Research back in 2011, sold that one to Gartner in 2016. My background is in telco, so everything that was an overlap between IoT and telco was always core stuff. But then starting to look at some of these other technology areas around AI and blockchain and edge and all sorts of things.
Lots of intersections, lots of
completely. So what we do, we work with technology vendors, technology adopters. Effectively, what we have is the luxury of talking to all of the great and the good of the industry to understand what they do, who they are, what their technologies do, all of these various things. And then we can kind of synthesize it, work out what the trends are that are happening, what are the implications of all of these changes, and then share that with the clients that we have. So it's not like we're particularly the biggest brains in the room, right? But we have probably the greatest access of just about anybody in the space.
Valuable
to everybody, yeah, completely. So
you co-authored a book, right, in 2020, but you came to some conclusions there around kind of why we are where we are today and what that looks like going forward. You finished that book in 2020, right? It's been a few years. We've had some time to see how these, like, let's call them revised or evolving predictions are going. So what's your view now? Do you have an updated perspective?
I do. I think there was a few challenges that we had with IoT back in, well, the 2010s, should we say. And what we tried to do in the book is pick some of those apart. Sure. One of those was that there were some really aggressive predictions about... Okay,
I still remember the Ericsson report from back in the day.
Completely. Yeah. And we tried to pick apart, okay, well, why did that not happen? Well, one of the reasons was that was way, way too overly aggressive anyway. And we were forecasting the market at that time, and our forecasts were about a quarter of that. Sure. So, and part of the problem, everything is very specific to a particular use case. Sure. Right? And there's not this single unifying platform, there's not a single unifying technology, everything's very fragmented. And all of the industries work at their own kind of a pace. Yep. And any predictions about hockey sticks are always going to be hopeful. Right. Should we say?
Maybe self-serving in the worst case.
Well, so you may very well say that. I can possibly comment. Of course not. But I think what we've seen is more of a realization that that's the case. There's a lot more of a recognition of horses for courses, more technologies that are more appropriate for particular use cases, and more of a recognition that this is actually a services industry. These companies that are deploying this stuff, this is not core for them. This is not a core activity for them. And I think there was a bit of a reticence to get involved in that hand-holding because it's not spectacularly scalable, right? Everybody wants to be the equivalent of a Salesforce in their industry. Right?
It's a horizontal, the platform and
Exactly right. And it turned out that the needs of different sales forces, they're pretty similar within certain...
You're serving the same general lead, right?
Exactly. Whereas within IoT, it is just so spectacular.
It could be the dog collar, the phone, or with the enterprise XYZ, right?
Completely. So that's rather more challenging. But what we're seeing, I think, is more of a recognition that that's the case.
When you think about the maturity of devices and the connectivity technology that brings those devices into this IoT ecosystem, so obviously that's evolved a lot in the last 10 years as well, right? Or 10, 15 even. Can you comment a little on the underlying, let's call it the underlying connectivity technology that's powering that evolution?
Yeah.
Because it's not just the devices, right? I think a lot of people think just devices.
But I think this is another one of those reasons to be cheerful, if I can put it that way, is that we've got something that we refer to as thin IoT or a thin IoT stack, right? You've got a set of technologies now which are way, way more appropriate for delivering IoT in constrained environments than they were 10, 15 years ago.
With the introduction of low power back in the day was a I don't know, I don't want to say stretch, that's maybe unfair, but it wasn't widespread and it wasn't scalable and it wasn't, et cetera. Now we start to see that is, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's
I'm certainly getting them. And some of the middleware platforms and the device technology, eSIM, iSIM, all of these types of technology certainly help. Now, they help with deploying in constrained environments, but then that brings its own challenges. I mean, that does open up the opportunity to connect a whole lot more devices, but you are working within some much tighter parameters. Where you were piggybacking on some of the older technologies, well, you had some margin of error because they weren't designed for IoT, and so you probably had rather more bandwidth than you needed.
These are heavier connectivity devices.
Exactly. Right? How often am I reporting? How big are the data packages? That all of that kind of stuff.
It's interesting to see, this kind of connected by design concept, right? How that will make it maybe more widespread and more scalable moving forward, right?
It should do. And can I throw something else into that as well, which is around AI? I know we're for sure going to be talking a little bit about AI. But the interesting thing with AI is well, suddenly you've got to start thinking more carefully about where the payload sits, where the processing sits in the network. Is it on the edge device? Is it somewhere within the network? Is it back in the data center?
How close does it need to be?
Yeah, exactly. There's a subsidiarity question. Right. So where do you put the processing? And that has implications for what your choices of technology are. If you're only going to be sending a tiny amount of data back because you're doing all the process on the edge device, well, you would use one type of technology. If you're streaming video,
if you need 4K video apps that run somewhere, it's a different.
It's gonna work in a different way. That question of where AI happens is inextricably linked with how you architect your IoT solutions as well. So it's fascinating.
TGI Open Mic.
Hello everyone, my name is Sanjay Kumar Mishra. I'm an AVP for Telecom, Media and Entertainment at HCL Technologies Limited, and I'm here today to talk about the impact that 5G, IoT and AI are having on the world today. Machines are truly taking over the world. IoT is transforming everyday objects like cars, homes, even your refrigerator, into smart things, into information ecosystems, which are in turn enriching our lives. Therefore, it's not surprising that IoT is touching literally every industry and the consumers. Even some of the traditional industries like manufacturing are adopting IoT in a bid to get to Industry 4.0. Today, the entire mobile industry is working to ensure that 5G is able to propel the massive IoT potential. Thanks to the rise of 5G and IoT, there are already 15 billion devices connected in the world today. To put things in perspective, this is twice the global population that exists today. And believe me or not, this is going to double further by the time we reach 2030. Organizations, therefore, have to do a lot to keep up with the changes, keep up with the transformations in AI, generative AI, as well as 5G, private 5G, network slicing, to stay ahead of the curve, or they will be left behind. This is the only way they are going to meet their goals, as well as the goals of their end users' experiences. System integrators like HCL Tech are right in the middle of it. They're at the convergence of all the various disparate elements that create this digital experience, whether it is network, or the hardware, or the software applications, or the things that drive user experience. HCL Tech brings all of that together for a superior customer experience. I am really excited that the interconnected world is finally here. I really feel that 5G, along with the massive IoT and AI principles, is truly going to change the world and take us towards a truly connected and intelligent world of tomorrow.
In the research that you do now and in some of the predictions, do you see that, we're at some sort of inflection point where, you're really seeing this massive adoption in enterprise verticals specifically, or do you see the mixed somehow different?
I think it's still mixed. I think it was notable that some of the barriers to adoption in consumer weren't as pronounced as they might be on the enterprise side of things.
Sure.
Right. Now, notwithstanding that it turns out nobody wants a connected toothbrush.
Sure, right.
Wants a connected wine
early
bottle.
test use case.
Yeah, completely.
Sure.
But actually it tends to be the more human factors, shall we say, that or organizational and operational factors, shall we say, that have been the things that have held it back. Proving the concept, understanding that how it will impact on the organization and its operations is the most significant thing for enterprise adoption. And we have possibly kind of thought that they would see the value immediately and adopt faster. But actually it takes a while to kind of get over that hump of understanding the implications for the organization and how it affects operations.
Yeah. Help me maybe connect the dots a little bit to what you're seeing in the IoT landscape today, right? And then maybe we'll go one level deeper on generative AI specifically.
Yeah. So if we take a step back a little bit, you can think of AI and IoT as almost a continuum, or one thing influence the other. Because the starting point for IoT was, I'm going to connect this thing to monitor it, and then I'm going to connect it to control it.
Right.
And then the next step on that is, and then the next one is automate.
Sure.
Okay. Well, if I'm automating it, how am I going to automate it?
Sure.
Well, AI is the pretty obvious thing to include in that.
Let's flash forward 12 months or 24 months, right? 5G is now like wider spread than it is today. Adoption is better. Enterprises are using it in different ways. And we also have chips that are more efficient and lower cost and lower power and everything else, which I assume are operating at evolving at some scale, right? Do we think that that's like a major inhibitor today, and therefore it's going to accelerate the adoption longer term? Like, how do you think about kind of the maturity of those technologies?
I think it can only help if you think about things like eSIM, iSIM. That's a pretty good example where effectively you're reducing the power consumption, you're reducing the bill of materials. Probably you're certainly reducing the size of the devices. So yes, implicitly having those new technologies does make it easier to roll out.
Sure.
Absolutely, not least because it takes a while for everybody to get used to how the technologies work, right, and what the implications are of them.
Now I'll go to generative AI for a second. So like everybody, you can't walk down the hallway here at MWC Las Vegas without hearing about it or talking about it. But I am curious on the IoT space. What you see.
Healthcare is absolutely the number one that comes up as a vertical, and it can be anything from figures of 25% improvements in CT scan effectiveness, and all the way through to really mundane stuff like facial recognition to make sure that person who's opening a pill
should be there
is the right person. Or
it's very practical, right?
Yeah,
you have to
completely. None of those are particularly IoT kind of use cases, but I couldn't kind of let a discussion on AI go without throwing in healthcare, because it is so noticeably the big one that seems to be making a lot of the running.
Yeah, for sure we see real examples. I think really interesting examples of where we see that kind of I mentioned before the convergence of the technology and the devices and everything else kind of coming to maturity, not at the same time, but in a similar path. And we see real results out of that, right? So I think it's super timely, super interesting.
And it's nice to see some technology focus on things in the real world, right? Yep. When all of your innovation is aimed at making your search engine 0.01% more effective,
right. Is that helping?
Does that help the world?
Sure.
Well, I mean, debatable, I guess, but probably not. If it makes your crop harvesting 25% more effective, that for me is
all of a sudden it's exciting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is we didn't talk yet about I would say IoT for good in this context, right? But AI for good is something I've been asking other guests about and trying to get a gauge of where they saw good examples of this. Obviously, the agricultural thing is something we're super passionate about and good experience with. Do you see this kind of, let's call it broader technology for good, IoT for good? Do you see good examples? Anything that comes to your mind that gets you excited about the industry?
Yeah. We identified a clean dozen of technology areas, right? So not the dirty dozen, but a clean dozen around things like smart buildings and some smart cities use cases and fleet and supply chain and all of these different areas, and the reductions in CO2 emissions from, for instance, more efficient fleet management, or the reduction in water consumption. We talked about agriculture already, but one of the great things there is by having more targeted watering, you can massively reduce the water consumption from agriculture. And a lot of it is to do with, is particularly IoT, but it's effectively where the rubber hits the road, quite literally in some cases. It's in the real world where all of the water's consumed, where the fuel's consumed, where the electricity's consumed, and if you can have some significant impact on reducing that, the consumption across all of those, you have a a good way of saving the planet.
It certainly would be, and I'm sure you guys have thought more about it than I have, but it would certainly be an interesting story, right? Like this idea of all of these verticals stacked on top of each other and the improvements that they're making at ABCDE, right? The agriculture, the efficiency of operating this, and the reach of that for access, and all of a sudden the economic value of that is tremendous, right? Yeah. Economic and I don't know, equity value. I don't know how you characterize that, right? But super interesting, right?
Yeah, we've tended to focus on the environmental impact, but there's obviously a neat overlap between that and economic return as well, right? If you're reducing,
everyone likes to hear a good economic return on something, right? So your economic value, as they say.
Well, it's very easy to have a ESG goals, SDG goals policy within an organization, but if that also comes alongside saving some money, then
it tends to be more ears listening.
Yeah, I think so. It's an easier sell within an organization.
It's super interesting. So I want to just think about the next 12 months. I like to ask all of our guests about what they think is coming, right? And it doesn't have to be a concrete milestone. It could be multiple things, but just in your space, is there something you're hopeful about, something you're kind of looking forward to 9 months from now, something you think we should all be thinking about?
Maybe it's not looking forward to, but there's, I think, a pronounced, should we say, decloudification.
Okay.
Part of this is just certain companies finding that actually the cloud wasn't the answer to where their storage and their processing needs sit, and actually on-prem maybe maybe that's a good thing. And a lot of that is scale. We work a lot with IoT MVNOs, and the way they've tended to set up to scale up is using the cloud. They put their core networks in the cloud, they put their connectivity management platforms, everything is cloud-based, which gets you so far. Sure. But then maybe when you're scaling to 100 million connections, which they might be hoping to do, maybe they need to then rethink the approach. And so, but there's also this decloudification with the move to edge and move to various edge locations. So coming out of centralized data centers,
location of things becomes super important.
Right? Yes, absolutely. So that might be mobile edge computing, so that the kind of mini data centers at the edge of the network, or it might be on the device, and managing the relationship between all of those things, which is incredibly important. But this whole dash to put everything in a centralized data center, well, maybe that's not quite the right approach. So 5G has a quite a significant role to play here. We look at 5G and we say, what's the opportunities associated with it? But actually, we think the main implication is more to do with architecture than it's to do with anything else. Sure. Because suddenly, with the low latency of 5G, the pinch point on the network isn't the access network anymore. Sure. It's the core network. It's the backhaul part of it. And then you start to rethink, does it make sense to put everything in a centralized data center when I might be sending data over 500 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers? Rather than doing that, you might put more intelligence at the edge, either at the edge of the network or the edge of the device. So it has some implications there. So it's those kinds of things that I'm looking at. And can I throw one other one?
Yeah, of course.
I talked a little bit about the being more service oriented, and there was, in the 2010s, there was maybe a quest from lots of the technology vendors to be a sort of all-encompassing, unified platform for every single
service.
And actually, it hasn't panned out like that.
For sure.
And companies have specific requirements that sit within their verticals, and so a little bit more verticalization, understanding the needs of the customer, supporting in that way. Private networks, good example.
Sure, great example.
Would we expect every private network, or the same companies, to be selling private networks to every different vertical? I don't think so. Right. I think you'll end up with companies that are specialists in stadia, or in manufacturing, or hospitals, or whatever, because there's specific requirements that those organizations have. So I think that's a good microcosm of that kind of a trend, a bit more vertical.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think vertical seems to be, if it wasn't generative AI, it's certainly vertical was the buzzword of our event this week here in Las Vegas. So I think every booth I walked by had some sort of vertical flavor, right? Even if they weren't in the network, the private network space. Right?
Yeah, I think. Well, I've been pushing that message for the last few years. I've been saying you got to talk to people about their vertical, and hopefully somebody gets.
I think it's your message has gotten through. I think.
Okay, well, that's
people heard it one way or another. All right, so. You've done most of the damage.
Okay.
But now I have to switch gears. I think that because you were here with us last year, you probably remember that we have something called TGI to go.
Yeah.
It is the most exciting part of our entire session, I am sure. I get to ask you right off the cuff, and you have to give your gut response. Now, fair warning, there's no right or wrong answer. We aren't going to judge you for that. So,
well, you may judge me a little.
Maybe a little, but okay. So, ready to go?
Yeah.
TGI to go.
All right, first question. Rod Stewart or Donny Osmond?
Well, it's got to be Rod the Mod.
I felt like I knew where you would go with that, but good. Okay.
Not that he's much of a mod these days, but well, certainly Rod.
Maybe not. Although I will say, I was joking with Joe, who was on with us before, that Donny Osmond is still here in Vegas, right, doing residency. Yeah, it has to be 10,000 years old. I don't know how old, but I mean the guy's been around forever, right? So maybe we'll do another artist. U2 or Bruno Mars?
If I have to pick, I'll go U2, but I can't say I'm a huge fan.
Number 2, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star
Wars. Okay. Like it's like a 50-50. Like half the audience gets angry, half the audience is happy. So, Belize or Miami?
I've not been to either, but I'll go Belize. It'd be a new country for me. I'm kind of an obsessive about visiting the new country, so I'm at about 100 now. So
I say go for it.
I like to get to anywhere I can. So Belize,
I like it. I think I spent some time in Ambergris Key, which is like one of the keys in Belize. Beautiful. It's worth the trip when you go. Italian or Japanese food?
Oh, Japanese.
Last one, hiking or swimming?
Definitely hiking.
Really?
I'm a big hiker, and I've never been a big swimming fan. So
not making sure you have a pool in your backyard and everything else, that kind of thing.
No. Well, maybe for bobbing around a little bit, but I've
casual.
Swimming has never been my.
You're not doing laps and activity.
That's
great. Well, Matt, I really appreciate it. Thank you for making time and joining us again. We hope it's a trend. We hope you'll come back next year, and then we'll be able to have you chat with us again. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hopefully it's clear I enjoyed my discussions both with Caroline and with Matt, and both on two diverse but somehow closely related topics. If you enjoyed the discussions, I hope you'll leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you'd like to learn more, please join us at www.mdocs.com/thegreatindoors.